You guys got the recording lights showing on your side?
Okay. I don't know. Oh, yeah, I see it on your screen. Yeah.
You see it on my screen?
Yep.
All right, good. Here we go. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Out of Control podcast. My name is Tony Brent. Today I have with me Mr. TC Tahoe and Mr. Scott Humston. We are Central Florida-based performers, comedians, magicians, magic comedians, comedy magicians, comedy/magicians. That's what we do. We thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about some interesting things. How you guys doing?
Doing well?
Doing good. Doing good. Just trying to feed 6 people in the midst of a pandemic with no gigs.
I'm just trying to eat. I'm eating for 6 people.
Scott, you need to move in with TC. Move your family.
Well, actually, he can move in with us and earn his keep. That'd be great.
There you go. Be happy to. Then I wouldn't have to straighten this place up.
I got to learn that rope routine someday.
Well, good. Well, today we're going to talk about a couple of things that's happened those guys are going to talk about some things, unusual, funny, odd things that's happened to them during their live shows. But I'm going to kick off today talking about the beginning of stand-up comedy as we know it. You guys like stand-up comedy?
Yes.
As long as I can sit down and watch it.
Oh! Now, TC, you've done straight stand-up comedy, correct?
Straight? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes, I have. Yeah.
Now, by stand-up comedy, let's clarify what we're talking about. Stand-up comedy being comedy performed by a person with no props, no funny costumes, no baggy pants, no funny hats.
It was the 80s and 90s, so you know, I did have MC Hammer pants, so.
Well,
but yeah, no props, just monology, just straight stand-up.
Straight stand-up. One of the things about stand-up comedy, when we think about stand-up comedy, obviously we think of the brick wall behind the person in the microphone on the mic stand, and that's what we think of as stand-up comedy. But stand-up comedy is relatively new. It didn't even land in the dictionary until the 1960s as a term, stand-up comedy. Now, and comedy's been around for ages, for thousands of years on stage, but it wasn't what we think of as stand-up comedy. You guys, who are some of your favorite stand-up comedians?
Well, I would say Steve Martin, but I'm a little young for when he was so popular. So I was a kid then, so I didn't watch the stuff, Wild and Crazy Guy. I've seen some of that, and some of it's still funny. A lot of it's not, but I like Steve Martin as a person and all the movies that he's done. But I'll tell you this, just watched the other night with my son, Jerry Seinfeld's newest release on Netflix. Fantastic, especially, this is going to sound a little sexist, but guys 30 to 70 years old, I think, would love that. And when Seinfeld stood on that stage and said he was 65 years old, I about fell off my couch.
Wow.
I couldn't believe that. But I will tell you, it's some of his best stand-up he's ever done. And then, of course, my favorite young up-and-coming guy who's already up is Nate Bargatze. And we all know his father, Steve, is a magician. Steve and I have known each other for a long time, but Nate keeps hitting it out of the park. His Tennessee Kid special on Netflix, again, just loved it. So those are 2 of my favorites that are pretty popular.
Yeah. I like a lot of the old guys, I like Carlin and from that era, I like the Don Rickles, stuff you can't do anymore. But modern guys, Jimmy Pardo, somebody a lot of people haven't heard of. He's got a very funny podcast that I love. I like most stand-up comics. I'll like something about them, you know, but I just like comedy in general, you know. I mean, I like it all, really. I can't think of anyone I don't like. Nah, I won't say that because it'd be mean. So yeah, I prefer the older stuff. I still do, you know. And that's not just because I'm old myself. I mean, you know, Don Rickles was before my time. You know, Phyllis Diller I loved, you know. I still like to go back and watch that old stuff.
So is there a difference? My son and I were talking about this the other day, Tony. Is there a difference between a stand-up comic and a comedian? The term comic versus comedian.
Well, yes. I mean, as far as a stand-up comedian versus a comedian, the term comedian has been around for hundreds of years, but they were originally more burlesque, what's known as burlesque. Comedians are minstrel show type comedians, and they were the goofy butt of the jokes a lot of times. And you can even go back to Shakespearean times, and there's comedy written into the plays and skits and things, and they were called comedians to some degree.
Is it like Commedia dell'arte or something, right? It was some
right
Greek comedy.
And, yeah, and in the 1800s, they were called comedians. They were called bananas, believe it or not, which is unknown exactly where that began. But we all know the term top banana.
Right.
Right.
Top banana only was in the in culture because of a play that was written that I think starred maybe Phil Silvers when he was young, and it was called Top Banana. But in theater, they called the comedians the bananas, and the number one comedian was the top banana. And they used to have what they call a bladder that they would hit each other with, and it was in the shape of a banana. So there's a theory that maybe that banana came from that. But again, it's all slapsticky. It was all slapsticky, hokey, very clownish, up until the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And there's a guy who is believed to have been the first person to walk out on the stage in a suit, a nice suit with no props. And he just walked out, and his name was Charlie Case. And they're not even sure. They think it was 1880s or the 1890s. And there's a book, the book has been out for a while, called The Legacy of the Wisecrack. And the stand-up comedy as the great American literary form. And it's on Amazon, I think. But this guy, Charlie Case, he came out on stage and he had nothing. And he walked out and he just started talking. And people were like, they'd never seen that before. It had not been done. But Charlie's career wasn't very long because he accidentally shot himself cleaning his gun. He had a gun, and his career was a fairly short career. So there's almost nothing about him out there.
The name of his biography was "That's Not Funny."
Yeah.
I should have used a banana.
I should have used a banana. And soon after this event, the bang gun was invented.
It's not too soon, right?
No. But there have been guys before him. Mark Twain was paid to go on and do monologues.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because we have, you know, I'm guessing at some point the goofy comedian merged with the storyteller.
It did. And the storytellers, there were storytellers all in the 1800s, but what they would do is they would go out and either usually sit in a chair and tell monologues.
Right.
And the monologues might be funny, okay? But a monologue is still not the same as what we know as a stand-up comedian.
Right.
And I mean, you could go and do monologues, and there was a lot of famous comedians in the 40s and 50s who did monologues, basically. Yeah. But the guy that was the most popular as far as stand-up that merged the two was Frank Fay. Have you guys ever heard of him?
Yeah.
I have not.
Okay, if you would have heard of him or ever seen him, it's probably because he is credited with discovering the Three Stooges.
Ah, okay.
Okay, Frank Fay was it's really actually a pretty interesting story. He was the first guy to walk out and tell joke, again, no costuming, no props, straight comedy, told jokes, but also played off of the audience. Just like what we think of as a stand-up comedian today. And he would walk out and he interacted with the audience, which apparently blew their minds. That he wasn't talking at them, he was talking to them. And he would comment on stuff, people would say comments, he would banter back and forth with the crowd, and they loved, he was huge.
I think that, breaking down that fourth wall, right?
Yes.
Which is amazing to me, and that was probably a shock for those people. But I even think about comedians today, and through that last, 40 years, 50 years, even the ones that still do that monologue versus the ones that interact with the audience. Even, again, back to Seinfeld, just because I just watched it the other night, even, him and his height, and he doesn't have to do this, was still very conversational with the audience. Even more so than probably when he started in some of that New York, kind of that style that came out of New York. But I find that interesting that some of the best comedians are the ones that are watching the audience and riffing with them versus just standing up there telling jokes, going through my set.
I love doing crowd work. But Frank Fay, didn't he have a comic off with Milton Berle?
Yes. Yeah, he actually inspired a lot of people. He inspired Milton Berle claimed that Frank Fay inspired him. I think that Jack Benny may have said that he was inspired by Frank Fay. Everybody started ripping him off, basically, is what happened. But at the height of his career, he was making $17,500 a week.
Oh my word!
And that was
I've never even made that.
Like in 1920.
Wow.
And he discovered the Three Stooges, and he used those three guys on stage as sort of his comic foils, and he would hit them and slap them and everything. But the thing about Frank Fay, the reason why he's not more well known today is he was a total, complete jerk.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he shot himself with a gun.
No.
Wait, now let me wrap my head around that. You're saying that a stand-up comedian was a jerk?
Yeah, can you believe it? Yeah, Frank Fay was racist, bigoted, fascist, wife beater, and an alcoholic. Anti-Semitic. He was also anti-Semitic.
But funny.
But he was so funny, he managed to get work, even beside he burned every bridge he ever had. He was a horrible, horrible human being. The Three Stooges hated him. That's why they got out away from him and then became famous on their own. But Frank Fay, interesting tidbit about him, he married Barbara Stanwyck, the actress, when she was very young, and she was still a showgirl. And he was a famous superstar. Well, it was a well-known fact that he abused her. And the movie A Star Is Born is based on Frank Fay and Barbara Stanwyck.
Wow.
It is, yeah. It's a commonly known thing. he was just horrible. And what happens is, the story is, Barbara Stanwyck's career goes up, 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 and his starts sinking down, down, down. And he hits the bottom, and she eventually divorced him. But the story was based on their life and how his career tanked. And she, she continued to rise as a star, and everybody knew he was abusing her. And then eventually she got away from him. But yeah, he was horrible. He would
Wait, could you say that she had the last laugh?
she definitely had the last laugh.
Sorry.
Because Frank Fay went down in history as really, he failed in the end as a person, and his career went away, and he should be, known, more well known, but such a guy was, he was just an awful person. There's a lot of stuff out there about him. He just
that sounds like a great Netflix original movie, doesn't it?
It does. It's
life.
Sounded like in some ways he really did inspire Milton Berle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I got to meet Milton, and it was later in his life, obviously, and he was not a happy man or a very likable man at that point.
I've heard that.
I was doing the show at Magic Castle, and we got told via somebody to hold the show because Milton Berle was there with a group of people, and they were going to pre-seat them. So Milton's agent came backstage and said they're going to pre-seat Milton and his group, and he said to me, "It's very important that you introduce Milton Berle during the show." And I said, "Well, I probably would have anyway." "No, you must introduce him." And I said, "Well, I just said I would." And before I could even finish my words, Milton came around the corner and said, "Look, kid, just introduce me." And they went and sat down, and there were, the showroom, about 200 people in there, and he had sat his group, which were about 25 people. And then Milton was like, "Okay, go ahead and start the show." And the stage manager was like, "Well, we have to let the other people in." And he's like, "Oh," and there were some other celebrities with his group. And when the show started, this was early on for me. I was young and a bit, I was angry that I got to meet Milton Berle and that he was an ass to me. So I thought it would be funny. So I'm doing my show. I started the show, and I say, before we go any further, I just want to say we have a celebrity in the audience. And I'm not going to lie, one of my favorite comedians ever. I admired this man for years. Ladies and gentlemen, Maury Amsterdam. And I never did mention Milton Berle, so he was not happy with me. I thought it was funny.
Well, speaking of that, you've had a lot of stuff. You have a long career. Tell us a story. Tell us something else that's happened to you that is odd or unusual, or.
Yeah, okay. A story that I worked cruise ships for years, 17 years, mostly with Carnival, and the story that the crew tell. I was unaware that this story was going around, but I was working on the Carnival Destiny, or as the crew and staff used to call it, the Death Star. It ship had so many problems. But I was doing the show, and they had gotten this, this was a while ago, they'd gotten a new Countryman microphone. They had just come out with this brand new Countryman, the little skinny, the one you use, Tony. And it was very expensive. They were, at the time, those were $900 microphones that they got. They got 2 of them on this ship. And they said to me during rehearsal, "Do you want to use this microphone?" I was like, "Oh, I'd love to, because my hands are free. I don't, So I go out to do the show, and there's a lady sitting in the front on her own, and I'm only on for about 5 minutes, and she gets up and starts to leave. And I have a habit of following people into the audience to say, "Where are you going? I'm not done. What are you doing?" So I made her come back and sit down. I actually took her by the arm and said, "No, the show, it'll get better. Don't worry. You'll enjoy it." I go back on stage. I do about 5 more minutes, and she gets to go again. And I follow her again. I say, "Ma'am, do you need to go to the bathroom? I don't want to stop." She goes, "No." I went, "Well, where are you going?" come back here and sit down. I actually brought her back and sat her down. I'm sure today that would, I guess I'd get sued for assault, but I actually, you know, sat her down. And as I was walking back up the stairs to the stage, the whole audience goes, she's running. And I turned around and she was running up the aisle. And there were actually 2 aisles, off 2 stairs off the stage that went around this bank of seats and out 2 exit doors. She was going this way, so I bolted for the other door, and I was going to grab her and bring her back. Unbeknownst to me, the big glass doors that you entered the showroom through, somebody had accidentally locked. So I went running towards these locked doors, and I hit it full on, like Wile E. Coyote, and bounced off the doors and landed a few feet back on my back, flat, laid out. And because I was wearing this beautiful microphone, the entire audience heard the impact because my face hit. I mean, I just, boom. And I just immediately, you know, my face was numb. I sat up and went, I'm fine. So everybody's laughing, thinking, oh, he just did a joke, right? As I'm walking back up on stage, I see the the cruise director, and he's going, I went, oh, I'm bleeding. Okay, I'm bleeding. So I grabbed some napkins from a waitress that's walking by, a cocktail waitress, and I walked back up on stage, and I think I've got a bloody nose. So I'm up on stage, and I pulled that away. I go, I guess she got away from me. And the whole audience went, oh, and I realized there was blood pouring into my mouth. I went, oh, okay, sorry. And I take the napkins and I kind of pushed on my nose, and blood squirted out. And that was the audience reaction. They all went, oh, okay, it's a joke. He's obviously, you know, squirting blood out. And I go, I'm going to be fine. So I hold this. I go, let me do one more thing, you know, but I think I probably should go. And I reach in my case to get a prop out, and blood just pours into my case. And I went, yeah, I think I'm done. And I turned to the cruise director going, I think he is done. Let's see what we can have for TC. Come back in an hour. We'll have another show. And as I'm walking away, I see there's so much blood on the floor. The stage manager's come out and is mopping it up.
Oh.
I'd cracked my nose up here, so there's blood coming from here too. And they took me to the infirmary. The doctor, it was the last night of the cruise, and the doctor, it was her last night, and she was going home tomorrow. She'd been on for 6 months. And she was in the crew bar having drinks. So she was a little bit tipsy. And she looks at me and goes, I don't want to do stitches here. So she just, you know, puts the super glue over the wound and closes it up. And the microphone, the cruise director holds up the microphone. It's covered in blood. He goes, well, I guess this is yours now. And I said, we'll just wipe it off with alcohol. He goes, no, TC, just keep it. After all, I get paid through the nose for it. So that became the joke, and people everywhere I went, every time I'd go to a ship, there'd be somebody go, oh, you're the guy that broke his nose, right? I'm going, well, I didn't break it, but yes, that's me. But do I have time to jump back real quick to the comedians? One of the reasons I know who you were talking about is because I have this book, which is a wonderful book. I was fortunate enough to do a show down in San Diego way that was called Young Comedians presented by Steve Allen. And Steve Allen was there. He introduced me and Steve Middleman and a couple other guys. And I was in awe. I mean, I've loved Steve Allen for so long. And it was a hard show to do because he introduced me and then stood off in the wings, but I could still see him out of the corner of my eye. So every time I tell a joke, I could see what he laughed at and what he didn't. And if he'd laugh, I'd go, oh, you like that one? Oh, I threw my timing off. Okay. You know, and I'd try and get back into it. But the next day, his secretary called and asked for our address, our mailing address. And then 2 days later, we got a box of books, like a dozen books that Steve Allen had written, and he signed them all. And he could not have been nicer. And the first book in there was this book.
Mm.
And right away, Leslie's like, is he trying to tell you something? and I was like, well, that didn't occur to me. Thanks. And then I opened it up, and he assigned it to TC, who knows how. So I don't care what else I do in my career. Steve Allen thought I was funny.
That's great. That's
Great.
two great. Those are both great stories.
Fantastic.
Scott,
Yes, sir.
give us the story.
So I started doing magic when I was a kid. Some professional shows, quote unquote, like by the age of 12, I was doing stuff, and I was trying to be funny in my shows too. Not so stand-up funny, but humorist, more humor style. But I got a flyer from a guy named Ed Harris. You guys probably remember who that was. And you could buy these pre-made flyers and put your info on them and then send them out to people. And we had, boy, I feel so old. We had rub-on lettering to make these flyers. So you like transfer, kind of like a temporary tattoo. So I made this flyer with the rub-on lettering. My dad had it in his little steady in our house. And I remember it said comedy magic with, and then you put your name, Scott Humston. So I did this, laughs, and it was kind of over the top with these drawings, people laughing and kind of cartoony looking. And I remember taking it to my father and saying, hey, look what I made. And I had them printed. I rode my bicycle down to the print shop about 2 miles away, and they printed a bunch for me, and I took it back and showed it to my dad, and he looked at it all. He looks at it, flips through it. He goes, do you really think you're that funny? Which was great. Again, one of my favorite stories, actually, but because I'm like, well, maybe, but it's like, go dad, so much for encouraging your child. However, it was about that same time I was taking magic lessons at the magic shop, and the guy loaned me some props because I had a big show coming up. I was in 7th grade. I was 13 years old, and it was going to be in Sumter County, which isn't too far here in Central Florida from where I live now. And I was going to be at Sumter High School for the Future Homemakers of America, the FHA organization in junior high school. So it was about 1,300 high school students. I had joined the FHA. My friend Tim and I had joined, and we were the only male members in our junior high school to join the Future Homemakers of America. Well, we did it because that's where all the girls were, honestly. And we knew we weren't playing football. So we got right in with the FHA ladies. But anyhow, excuse me, my first big show, right? 1,300 people at this show. And I'm doing this gag where you break an egg into a glass and it doesn't have a bottom on it. And the kid's holding it in his hand. Now, the kid is probably as bigger than I am, because I'm only 13. He was probably high school. And I broke the egg, and of course it lands in his hand. I pick up the glass and I show it to the audience. Oh, I got the wrong glass. I'm so sorry. And of course he's got an egg dripping on his hand, and I don't even know why I was doing this bit. I don't remember what it led into, but all he did was took the egg and smeared it against my tux all over the front of me. And I just looked down, and I didn't know what to say, right? I never had anybody do that before. Of course, he was a jerk too. And so he walked off stage, and then the audience, when I didn't do anything to him, all of a sudden they started cheering and clapping for me. And I had egg rolling down the front of my costume. So that was my first. I wrote later in my little note that was my first professional show at age 13. But all I could say after it was over is, well, I guess the yoke was on me.
Yeah.
Which is
it's better than having blood.
Terrible pun, but it was a true story. But both of those things are my early introduction to comedy magic.
Yeah, that's much better than having blood all over yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
But I tend to do that. It's that. Sadly, I wish that was the only story I had that involved blood. In fact, about 10 minutes before we started this, I stepped on a tack.
Ooh.
Yeah. When this is done, I'm going to pull it out. I didn't really want any more blood coming in. So it's still there.
This is the blood episode. Blood and yolk.
That's funny, TC.
Wow.
It's another reason I'm drinking.
After it's over, that's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
Funny stuff.
Appreciate it. And when we get this up, anybody can go online and see both TC and Scott's links to their website, and also links to mine, as well as the Out of Control Comedy Magic Dinner Show. which is located inside of Wonderworks here in sunny Orlando, Florida. We hope to be back up and running soon, and we hope to see you guys real soon. Thank you, guys. Thank everybody for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day.